Top 15 WWE Divas who hate each other. Earl.
If you are brand new to our channel, we invite you to take a moment to subscribe. Just click on the lit red button as well as the gray bell. Why the bell? Well, it will let you know every time we post a new video.
15.
Becky Lynch and Liv Morgan. Liv Morgan made her debut recently on the main roster as part of the Riot Squad. Becky Lynch has been a proud member of the SmackDown Women's division, and was its first champion. Behind the scenes, she's a member of the Four Horsewomen, alongside Charlotte, Bayley, and Sasha, so she's clearly a locker room leader. Morgan fell victim to a rookie mistake when she debuted on the main roster. Lynch had made comments about Morgan and her performance at Clash of Champions. Specifically, Morgan's faux pas of hitting her own partner, while everyone fought outside. Instead of taking the veteran's criticism in stride, Morgan decided to respond by stating she cringes whenever she hears Lynch say straight fire. An easy layup for Lynch when she retorted that she feels the same way watching Morgan in the ring. Luckily the nonsense ended there. But things can always pick back up when Lynch returns from shooting the Marine 6.
14.
Sunny and Sable. The beef between Attitude Era divas Sunny and Sable is the odd feud on this list. Why? As far as the two blonde stunners are concerned, they both helped to elevate the WWE to new heights of popularity in the mid-90s thanks to their cover girl looks and girl next door smiles, not to mention other assets. Putting two dynamite hotties in the same locker room is a recipe for complete and utter disaster. Seemingly, Sable has always taken the high road, barely commenting about it, but their rivalry is certainly a can of worms. Sunny was the most downloaded woman on the internet in 1996. Sable's original issue of Playboy flew off the shelves. Sunny claimed, to this day, half-assed her first, but she turned the offer down. Sunny ditched her wrestler hobby for HBK, and was treated like garbage. Sable ditched her wrestler hobby for Brock Lesnar, and has been treated like royalty. Sable gets to live the good life now, while Sunny has unfortunately been a train wreck for the past decade or so. Who do you think topped who?
13.
Maria Kanellis and Melina. While Maria is a supporting character in the heat between Maryse and Nikki Bella, she is front and center in her own feud. This one is with one of the most gorgeous divas ever, Scream Queen, Melina. Melina has been involved in at least 2 high-profile relationships with other wrestlers on the card, notably with John Morrison and the Animal, Batista. Why Maria speaks about these matters is anyone's guess, but according to her, Melina would hold backstage meetings about who the other members of the Divas roster were allowed to date. Again, why anyone paid attention to her is anyone's guess, as well as demand other workers not use certain moves. While Melina has seldom spoken about events like this, considering the reputation she earned for sleeping her way around the locker room, perhaps it's best if she doesn't say a whole lot one way or the other. 12. Missy, Hyatt and Madusa. There was a down south version of the WWE Divas and WCW ladies, Missy, Hyatt and Madusa. They both played vivacious vixens to the hilt. Missy was a flirtatious and flighty co-host and sometimes manager. Madusa was and still is considered one of the most highly trained wrestlers, male or female, who, at the time, was also used in the valet manager role. Both ladies were hot stuff in their day, and it was hot stuff, Eddie Gilbert, that came between the two blonde stunners. Hyatt was married to Eddie first. They were married briefly, and divorced in 1989. Then Gilbert shacked up with Madusa, and was married to her less than a year in 1990. Not much hullabaloo has been made over the years about this, but you'd have to imagine Missy was none too pleased when one of the only other ladies in the WCW locker room was cavorting around with her ex.
11.
11. Stephanie McMahon and Chyna. Out of all of the diva beefs, trysts, and betrayals on this list, the feud between the billion-dollar princess, Stephanie McMahon, and the ninth wonder of the world, Chyna, rocked the entire industry like no other, and that is because of McMahon's last name. While at the time, Vince McMahon would have no part in Stephanie dating any of the wrestlers, even he could not have booked a better storyline. For a few years one of the top acts in the company was Triple H and Chyna, both as a pair, and as members of DX. He was the brash and cocky heel, and she was something the wrestling world hadn't seen before, a woman built like a brick-ass number, plus House, who was Helmsley's heater. But behind the scenes, the duo were so much more. The on-screen storyline that featured Hunter essentially drugging, kidnapping, and marrying Stephanie eventually became real life and blossomed into true love, a marriage, and the entire future of the WWE now rests with the power couple. Chyna was never the same after all of the news came out. She was released from her contract, and her life sadly went downhill from there until her death in
10.
10. Sasha Banks and Alexa Bliss. One of the latest wars of the WWE is between the boss, Sasha Banks, and the goddess, Alexa Bliss. With both ladies starting in NXT a year apart from one another, they share several friends backstage as well as colleagues, but seldom seem to hang out, or even speak about one another. But no one backstage made much of a thing about it until the ladies started working against one another earlier this year. The comments they made towards one another led people to believe the heat between them was real. Lifelong fan Sasha accused Bliss of just playing wrestler, while Bliss accused the boss of just trying to get attention. Banks also called out the goddess for not knowing the difference between Matt and Jeff Hardy. Is the heat real? For an angle? Or is it all just sour grapes for the boss, who has been demoted considerably since her NXT days, while Alexa has been promoted to a goddess and one of the faces of the company?
9.
9. AJ Lee and the Bella Twins. Imagine being on top of the world, not just in the Divas division, but in the entire company. When they were both in the company, AJ Lee and the Bella Twins fit that description, if not for very different reasons. The Bellas were, and in some ways still are, the face of the division and spokeswomen of the company. Plus, they're both ridiculously smoking hot. While AJ is no slouch in the looks department, her character was also insane, and she knew how to work in the ring, attributes that many wrestling fans herald. Their personalities never clicked, and things got worse when AJ cut a promo about the twins, stating, "Talent isn't sexually transmitted," alluding to the fact that they date and are married to John Cena and Daniel Bryan respectively. It was clear during her run that Lee didn't care for the divas of Total Divas, and lashed out at all of them, but the Bellas, being the main stars of the show, received the brunt of the nutjob's wrath.
8.
8. Sasha Banks and Lana. In a locker room full of tremendous-looking ladies, there's bound to be all kinds of heat. With less spots on top for the ladies than there are the men, there's plenty of shade to be thrown around in an effort to get to the top. Especially when you're Sasha Banks, who seems to take umbrage with supposed non-fans getting a break, and then having to watch their stock rise above hers. Case in point, the ravishing Russian Lana. Apparently, the boss in the former diva Summer Rae took too kindly to Lana, liking a tweet from another former diva, Melina, who had spoken about how it made sense for Banks to lose to Alicia Fox. Banks and Rae resorted to catty schoolgirl tactics and started the hashtag BL2017, which stands for Block Lana 2017. Lana responded by blocking the hate. Yes folks, these are two supposed adults having beef with each other over someone else's friggin' tweet about her opinion on the psychology of a choreographed fight. 7. Nikki Bella and Maryse. Two eye candy divas who started around the same time. One worked very hard to hone her craft to be able to keep up with the current crop of skilled female workers. The other in this generation is very wonderful eye candy managing her real-life husband, which finally took The Miz to the next level. According to Kanellis, the issues between Nikki Bella and Maryse started in 2010, when Nikki caught Maryse dancing with her then BF, Dolph Ziggler. Clearly, she didn't take too kindly to this since even now, several years later, Nikki's with Chyna and Maryse is happily married to The Miz, that she still used her leverage to keep Maryse off of Total Divas. The real-life heat that Nikki had for Maryse boiled over into the storylines earlier this year, when Miz and Maryse started mocking Nikki and Chyna, which led to their big mixed tag match at last year's WrestleMania. 6. Charlotte Flair and Paige. Two of the most accomplished performers on the roster, male or female, are Charlotte Flair and Paige. Both are second-generation superstars who are working very hard to meet and exceed familial expectations. So of course, professional ambition to be the absolute best would drive these two, and drive a wedge through whatever friendship they had, right? Or maybe because when they worked their program, Paige went a little below the belt, when she commented on Charlotte's deceased brother Reed, didn't have much fight in him. Actually, the two powerhouse divas don't speak much these days thanks to Alberto El Patron. The former WWE superstar, and current Impact star was with Charlotte after or before separating from his first wife, depending on whose story you believe. Obviously shacking up with Paige after Charlotte would be a factor in creating a rift between the two former friends. For a moment, it seemed as if Paige and Alberto had something real, if not crazy. The pair has broken off their engagement, but that doesn't mean Charlotte and Paige started magically liking each other.
5.
Dana Brooke and Lana. The ravishing Russian Lana is the subject of yet another feud. This one is actually a little more commonplace among locker rooms, and has been the topic of several arguments throughout the history of the entire sport, stealing another wrestler's finishing maneuver. On an episode of Total Divas, had Lana accusing the bodybuilding beauty Dana Brooke of taking her finishing move, even though Brooke uses a salmon driver and Lana used a powerbomb variation. Brooke believes the show and the Russian wronged her with the accusation, and defended herself on Twitter, stating she's been using the move for years in NXT, and anyone can go on the WWE network and check her out to prove it. Lana actually was a little more mature here than she has been on Twitter, and decided to keep her 140 characters to her. 4. Francine and Dawn Marie. This list wouldn't feel complete without an old-school ECW feud. Cue Joey Styles' squealing catfight. You would assume with so few ladies in the ECW locker room, they'd stick together. But between the Queen of Extreme, Francine and Tammy Lynn bitch, Dawn Marie, it was the exact opposite. Supposedly the former would make the latter cry every day during their tenure in the land of Extreme. Dawn's hatred of Francine boiled over at the very first WWE-produced ECW One Night Stand back in 2005, when Francine had supposedly snubbed the then WWE employee, Dawn, who would later assault her in the locker room, lashed out and yelled how much she hated her, and how Francine had tried to get the other Extreme Divas fired at one point or another. Obviously, Francine denied that claim, citing how she would try to get Sunny booked. She claimed she had no idea what Dawn Marie was even talking about.
3.
Lana and Paige. As far as in-ring skill is concerned, there couldn't be more of a diametrically opposed duo than Paige and Lana. Paige has been wrestling literally since she was in the womb. Lana has only recently started training, since she was hired more as eye candy than being a performer. The ravishing Russian has recently spoken out against the wild child anti-diva. She accused Paige of bullying her when they were both in NXT. This all started when Lana had been showing support for Charlotte in tweets during the Charlotte Paige program. Paige denied the allegations and claimed Lana was trying to smash her way into the angle. Obviously that didn't happen. Was Lana working an angle, or did this actually happen? In any event, the goth and the blonde seem to make up and have a ball hanging out together, claiming they love each other and both break the internet together. Considering not a lot of hilabaloo has been made of this beef led people to question how valid it was.
2.
2. Lana and Summer Rae. Lana likes to get herself in all kinds of heat with the rest of the locker room, doesn't she? This one even has the added bonus of Lana's real-life hubby, Rusev, getting involved. Summer Rae once used the term roast beef to insult her. Google the phrase. Rae also likes a lot of shade-filled tweets directed at the ravishing Russian. Lana commented on Enzo wanting to stuff her turkey during their brief storyline together. Rusev stepped in at this point, stating, "No one asked her, Rae." Where all of this stemmed from is anyone's guess, but in the world of wrestling, where real life and kayfabe are constantly blurred, sometimes it's hard to decipher where the real heat stems from. Perhaps Summer Rae and all of the other divas who have heat with Lana are just jealous that Vince logs her as the face of the division, even though she actually isn't.
1.
1. Nia Jax in the locker room. Taking one look at all of the divas on the roster, and it's easy to play which of these things is not like the other with Nia Jax. All of the other girls are slender, fit, and dainty. Nia Jax is tall, wide, and certainly not dainty at all. The salmon-born Jax has been a plus-sized model in the past. She is beautiful and there is certainly a need for her type on the roster. That being said, the cousin of The Rock has learned to take the body shaming in stride from fans and haters alike. But several weeks ago on Twitter, she'd apparently taken all she could stand from her coworkers. And who could blame her? Considering the WWE has a whole anti-bullying campaign, the supposed remarks from Jax's coworkers are even more terrible. Whether or not it is a direct result of Jax's backlash, or just an idea creative had, Jax has been involved romantically with Enzo Amore.
Yeah.